Our New Testament reading, our Gospel reading, comes from John 12, verse 1 to 8. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Thanks be to God for his word. As you know, we're journeying through a sermon series called Can You Drink the Cup, based on the book by Henri Nouwen with the same name. Henri Nouwen was a theologian and ordained Catholic priest. He wrote many books and he had a very wide ministry, but Can You Drink the Cup was the last book that he wrote before he died in 1996. That's been translated into about 10 languages and has blessed many people. I encourage you to get a book if you don't have one already. And Neil has worked chapter by chapter through the book in the sermon series. So far, we've covered holding the cup, simply acknowledging the cup that we each uniquely and personally have been given in life. We've covered the cup of sorrow and how we respond to that. We've spoken about the cup of joy and how even our sorrow and our suffering can lead to a place of joy. We've looked at lifting the cup and explored the importance of living our lives in community. And today we continue with the series and look at the cup of blessings, lifting the cup of blessings. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know I would need to preach this installment of the series. When I saw my name in the preaching plan, I thought I would speak from the lectionary as I'm usually expected to do, but Neil didn't want to interrupt the series. He's at Brooklyn this morning. And the timing of the series is quite important because we land with the conclusion on Easter Sunday. So he said he would send me his notes for today and I was to work with them and adapt them as I see fit. And at first I thought, this is marvelous, I've got a complete sermon coming my way, I won't have to do anything. But I'll tell you, working with someone else's sermon notes is harder than writing your own. Neil has a master's degree in theology and I haven't. So I had to try and adapt it a little to something that really made sense to me. So bear with me this morning. You'll be hearing some of Neil's insights and thoughts and some of mine. But mostly I hope you'll hear the voice and the heart of God as we hear his word this morning. Let's just bow our heads in prayer as we prepare for the word. Oh Lord our God, on this Sunday in Lent, grant us that we might hear clearly the word that you have for us. Guide us and direct us as we continue our journey towards Easter and strengthen our faith. This we pray in Christ's name. Amen. The story that's told at the beginning of this week's chapter in the book Holding the Cup is a personal story from Henri Nouwen's life. He spent a great deal of time working and ministering at the La Hache Daybreak community in Canada, which is a residence for mentally disabled people. And Henri Nouwen had great skill with all walks of life. And so he developed very close relationships and friendships with some of the residents at the Daybreak community. And one of his very close friends was a mentally disabled man called Trevor. And they spent a lot of time together, and Henri Nouwen and Trevor really enjoyed each other's company. But at one stage, Trevor had to be moved to a mental hospital for psychological evaluation. Henri Nouwen stayed at the Daybreak community, and he missed his friend Trevor while Trevor was in this hospital. So one day he phoned to the hospital and said, could he come and just pop in and see Trevor? And they got terribly excited about this because Henri Nouwen was a bit of a local celebrity, and they said, oh yes, come along, but we'll make a lunch date and we'll have some of the staff, the psychologists and psychiatrists join us, and some of the local ministers, and the mayor and the hospital chaplain and the whole crowd. So quite a bit bigger than what Henri Nouwen had in mind, but he agreed it would give him a chance to see Trevor. So off he went, and he got to the hospital, and they were about to whisk him off for lunch, and he said, but where's Trevor? He's really the one that I've come to see. And they said, no, you can see Trevor after lunch. And he said, well, how about Trevor join us for lunch? And they said, oh no, this, we booked a special room for this event on the premises, and that's only for staff and guests. Also, patients and staff don't mingle for meals, and on they went. But he insisted. He said, we'd just love Trevor to join us for lunch. So after much resistance, they went to Trevor, brought him in, and the lunch began. And it was quite subdued. Not everyone knew each other, because some were from the hospital, some were outsiders, all very distinguished people. And there was a quiet, solemn atmosphere. And suddenly Trevor stood up with his glass of cool drink and said, ladies and gentlemen, a toast. And this was very unexpected, this was inappropriate, and a look of anxiety came over everyone's faces in the room. This wasn't the right behavior. What was Trevor going to do next? And what happened next was that Trevor very joyfully and freely began singing, if you're happy and you know it, lift your glass. If you're happy and you know it, lift your glass. I'm not going to sing it, but I get the idea. If you're happy and you know it, if you're happy and you know it, if you're happy and you know it, lift your glass. And Henri Nouwen was watching the scene unfold and wondering what was going to happen next. And suddenly this like he just joined to the deep group of people, stood up and joined in, and they smiled and they sang along, and the whole sing-along began, and the whole atmosphere changed, and they ended up sharing and having a wonderful time. And the point that Nouwen makes in describing this incident is that when we simply come as ourselves, exactly as we are, just as Trevor did, in all his uniqueness and innocence, when we come with whatever cup we've been given in life, we can be a cup of blessing to others. In this instance, it was Trevor's spontaneity and lack of awareness of occasion that was wonderful. It was used to break down barriers and create a lovely atmosphere. And we should all be able to do that. We should all be able to come as we are in our uniqueness, be able to share our sufferings, but that takes a certain vulnerability. And generally we don't like being vulnerable. I have a recurring dream, more like a nightmare. I dream that I'm in a place of vulnerability, fear of failure. I dream I'm about to write an exam and I don't know what the subject is. I haven't studied, but I have to write this exam. And it's the kind of thing where you wake up in a cold sweat. Neil said in his notes that he has a recurring dream that he arrives at church, he's either late, or he hasn't prepared a sermon, or he arrives in time but he does not have his sermon notes with him. Terrible feeling of vulnerability there. I haven't had that dream yet, but it might come my way. Some people dream that they're in front of a crowd and they're wearing their pajamas. Those kinds of scenes of vulnerability hopefully don't plague us during the day, but they plague us in our dreams at night. We don't like to be vulnerable, we don't like to be exposed. And in many ways, our entire culture is geared towards eliminating vulnerability. We want to look as if we've got it together, we've got all the answers. Where we live here on the West Coast, there are pockets of wealth and luxury around us. And it's easy to give the impression that you have the right house and the right car, that you've got everything together. But often it's when we show people that we haven't got everything together, when we show people our real selves and our real sufferings, that's when we actually bless other people. In our passage today from John 12, we read about Mary, who in the company of many people at a very important dinner, took a jar of expensive perfume, poured it over Jesus' feet, and wiped his feet with her hair. There was a lot that was wrong with this. It was an expensive perfume. And culturally, it was totally unacceptable for a woman to anoint a man's feet and wipe his feet with her hair. She must have known that she was making herself vulnerable, that she was doing something that was generally unacceptable. We only read here of Judas's criticism of her, of course being a rough egg, being the one who would betray Christ. We would expect him to come up with something negative to say at every occasion. But there were probably others who watched Mary's act and felt uncomfortable about it. But she had felt led to do it. Something had prompted her in her heart to bless Jesus in this way. And it was a wonderful blessing for Jesus. He immediately defended her against Judas and said, "Leave her alone." And the aroma of the fragrance filled the house. I think that is such a lovely metaphor, such a lovely image of a blessing just spreading out beyond even the person for whom it was intended, just covering the people around. Sometimes, some of the times of being most blessed is by someone who's been vulnerable, who's shared with me at a place of absolute realness. My husband and I are friends with a couple who have been through some incredibly difficult things, years of financial struggle and difficulty, and grappling with God to understand His will for their lives. But through their entire journey, they've never pretended to be anything other than what they are. They openly share their struggles. But also, and this is so important, they share how God is working in those struggles. The absolute joy and clarity with which they share God's provision in their lives, sometimes down to the last cent. I remember one story that the husband told me where it just blew my mind. He literally needed an exact sum of money, and God provided it. The exact amount came into his bank account. You read these stories sometimes, but when it actually happens to someone close to you, it just reminds you of God's provision in people's lives. And they were able to share with us recently of how their younger daughter, 20 years old, who had fallen away from the church, turned her back on Christ, had come back into the fold. She'd been on a long exploration journey, exploring other religions, and she felt as part of her exploration she should be fair to Christianity as well and read the Bible from beginning to end as part of her journey, and she did. And as she read, she became so convicted and so convinced that this was the truth that she gave her life back to Christ. And it was so wonderful. We walked with this couple through the anxious time of their daughter leaving the church and all the anguish that goes with that, and to be able to share in their joy, to be able to share in the blessing of their daughter coming back was just a wonderful experience. And it's so encouraging when someone talks about their cup of suffering and how God has transformed it into a cup of blessing. And it's important that the cup of blessing part comes into it. We all know those people who share about their struggles all the time. And we do all have struggles. We can't diminish that. It's true. But we know those people who get stuck there, and they want to stay there. It's part of their identity, almost. But God is a transforming God. He wants to move us from the place of struggle to the place of blessing. He wants to break through. He wants to bring His blessing like that. And ultimately, this transition from suffering to blessing is what happened on the cross. The cross is the blueprint for us of suffering and blessing. Approaching Easter, we are more mindful than ever of the death and the resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. And the crucifixion was full of shame. It was a time of great vulnerability. The King of the Jews, the hope of all nations, was stripped, tortured, hung on a cross, very publicly. This was a public event. There was nothing, he had no place to hide. It was a very public event and very brutal, very cruel, stripped, lashed, tortured, hung to death on a cross. That was a cup of suffering. And Jesus knew it was coming, which is why the day before He was crucified, Luke 22 verse 42, he says, Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. He was referring to what was coming, the cup of suffering that was coming his way. But then he prayed, yet not my will, but yours be done. And so he was crucified. And our sins, the things that we're ashamed of, the things that make us feel vulnerable, he took with him to the cross. He drank the cup of suffering that was ours to drink. But then came the resurrection. The blessing of the resurrection, the glory of the resurrection. Without the cross, without the crucifixion, there could not have been the resurrection. They're like two sides of the same coin. And for me, this is just it's the ultimate picture of suffering and blessing. The pattern of suffering and blessing in life as Christians. The one can't exist without the other. So as we're going through a time of suffering, we're going through a time of difficulty and struggle, know that there is blessing. Sometimes the blessing is far away, but sometimes even in the struggle, even in the suffering, God is blessing us. There are things to be grateful for. There are things that we see. Just from personal experience, when my mother was very ill with cancer, she was a blessing to us. She was terminally ill, she was dying, but she was such a blessing to us with her peacefulness and her acceptance and her joy and just the way she soldiered through the last months of her life. Even in suffering and struggle, there is blessing. And that is how God works in our lives. So as a community of Christians here at Molliton Methodist, we should not be afraid to share our struggles with each other and pray for each other. Make ourselves vulnerable, share where we're at, but pray for each other that the cup of blessing will be ours, that we will have a cup of blessing to lift at the end. To close, I want to draw us back to today's Old Testament reading from Isaiah 43, specifically verse 18 and 19, which say, Forget the former things, do not dwell in the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness, and streams in the wasteland. I am making a way in the wilderness, and streams in the wasteland. God makes a way for us. He made a way for us back to Him through His Son. He makes a way for us through our cup of suffering, by being with us, by blessing us while we suffer, and by pointing to us always the fact that there is blessing still to come. He causes streams to appear in the wasteland. In the deserts of our lives, He sends water. I pray today for all of us that our vulnerabilities, our suffering, our struggle will bring us simply closer to God and lead us closer to His blessings. May it be for me as it is for you. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Father God, you are a faithful God. When there is suffering in our lives, you bring blessing. Lift our eyes to you so that we may find you in our story. Whatever story that may be, whatever chapter it may be, whatever page we are on, may we find you in that. May we find you in all our situations. May we find you in whatever life throws at us. May we be able to lift the cup of blessing as a testimony to your work in our lives. Strengthen us this week, Father, as we seek to shine your light in the darkness around us and show the world the glory and the beauty and the blessing of our risen Savior. This we ask in Christ's name. Amen. Amen.